The 163rd Motorized Division crossed the Finnish border like a parade. Brass instruments gleamed in the pale Arctic sun. Propaganda trucks groaned under loads of leaflets promising liberation. Colonel Volkov adjusted his wool cap and smiled at the neat columns stretching 40 kilometers behind him. Tanks, artillery, supply wagons, a conquering army dressed for a celebration. The temperature sat at minus 22 Celsius. Comrades will be drinking vodka in Helsinki by Christmas, Volkov told his aide. The brass band struck up another march. Tubas echoed off the snow-laden pines. The operation would be finished by evening. Nobody watched the tree line. Corporal Matti Virtanen belly-crawled through the snowdrifts 30 centimeters deep. His white snow cape made him invisible against the forest floor. He kept packed snow in his mouth to prevent breath steam from betraying his position. Behind him, 349 other Finnish soldiers waited in the killing zone, the 1,500-meter-wide isthmus. Between Lake Kuivasjärvi and Lake Kuomasjärvi formed a perfect bottleneck. Virtanen had helped pile snow in front of the rifle positions to dampen muzzle blast signatures. Iron sights only. Glass fogged in this cold. Glass caught light. Glass killed you. The Soviet column moved like a metal snake. Drivers sang folk songs. Political officers distributed cigarettes and speeches about Finnish workers eager for liberation. The forest felt wrong, too quiet beneath the martial music. Virtanen selected his first target through his Seiko M/28-30 iron sights. A young lieutenant with gold shoulder boards pointing at something in the snow. The rifle cracked once. The lieutenant dropped at 200 meters. The 7.6, 2x54mm R cartridge ejected into the snow. No lens glint, no fogging, clean kill. Chaos erupted along the column. The brass band stopped mid-note. Propaganda trucks skidded sideways as drivers dove for cover. But there was nowhere to hide. The road trapped them like cattle in a shoot. Finnish soldiers opened fire from both flanks. The Suomi KP/31 submachine guns chattered at 900 rounds per minute. Muzzle flashes sparked from invisible positions. Soviets fell in the snow, their khaki coats absorbing white powder as they bled. Colonel Volkov grabbed his radio handset with shaking fingers. A 9mm parabellum round from a Suomi punched through his throat. The radio crackled static. The brass instruments lay scattered in crimson snow like broken toys. The victory parade had become a slaughter in under 3 minutes. This was Suomussalmi. December 1939, and it was only beginning. The Suomi KP/31 submachine gun weighed 4.6 kilograms. Corporal Korhonen felt every gram as he worked through his ammunition. The technique was simple and lethal. Pack snow dense against the muzzle. Build a barrier 6 inches high. The blast disperses into white powder instead of a telltale puff. The 7.6 2x54mm R round kicks hard. No flash signature. No position revealed. The Soviets had no answer for it. Senior Lieutenant Alexei Petrov pressed his face against the frozen earth from inside a disabled BT-5 tank. Intelligence had promised Finnish forces were retreating toward Viipuri. No organized resistance expected. Reconnaissance patrols had found abandoned positions, empty villages. It had all felt too easy. His loader, a farm boy from Ukraine, kept glancing at the tree line. "Comrade Lieutenant," the boy whispered, "something's wrong with this place." The woods held an unnatural silence. No birds, no wind through the branches, just the rumble of engines and the squeak of tank treads on snow. The air carried a strange metallic taste, like copper pennies, like blood before it spilled. Then the forest came alive. The 44th Rifle Division had 40,000 men. Modern equipment, air support on call. What they faced at the Kuomasjärvi Isthmus were 350 Finnish defenders with 4 vintage 76.2 millimeter artillery pieces from the 1890s and 237 millimeter Bofors anti-tank guns. Museum pieces. Against a motorized Soviet division, the Finns understood one thing the Soviets had forgotten. Roads kill armies, mati, the Finnish word for a cubic meter of firewood. Stack it, split it, burn it. Finnish ski troops materialized from the boreal forest like white ghosts. They struck the head of the column, then the tail. The middle was trapped, packed dense, unable to maneuver in the deep snow off-road. Each section of column then faced annihilation alone. Roadblocks every 400 meters turned the Rate Road into a 40-kilometer abattoir. Sergeant Petrov screamed into his radio. "Where are they shooting from?" Nobody could answer him. The Finnish soldiers had become the landscape itself. White snow capes rendered them invisible. They moved through 30-centimeter drifts like phantoms. They kept packed snow in their mouths to eliminate breath steam. They built compact snow barriers before every firing position to swallow muzzle flash. The Soviet khaki overcoats stood out like dark bloodstains against white wilderness. Every exhale from a Soviet soldier marked him for death. The T-26 tanks crawled forward through the snow. Their 45 millimeter guns swept left and right. The crews inside couldn't see past 10 meters in the white hell. Captain Markov pressed his face against the vision block. Ice crystals formed on the steel. The temperature gauge read -38 Celsius. "Where are the Finns?" his gunner whispered. The answer came from nowhere, a birch log thick as a man's torso, jammed between the drive sprocket and track. The T-26 lurched, stopped dead. Finnish ghosts materialized from the snowdrifts. They worked steel crowbars into the bogie wheels like mechanics. No panic, no rush. Professional dismantlement. Markov reached for his Tokarev TT-33. The hatch wouldn't open. Something heavy pressed down from above. The Molotov cocktail burst against the engine deck. Gasoline mixed with tar, burning at 400 degrees. The fumes seeped through every seal. "Get us out!" the driver screamed. Logs blocked the tracks. The 30-ton machine had become a tomb. Outside, a Finnish squad covered the hatches with Suomi KP/-31 submachine guns. 9mm parabellum rounds could punch through the vision blocks at close range. The 45mm rounds cooked off in sequence inside the burning hull. Each detonation sent shockwaves through the crew compartment. Markov's eardrums burst. Blood ran down his neck and froze. He thought about the propaganda leaflets in the supply trucks. The Finnish workers welcomed their Soviet liberators. The brass band that played at the border crossing. The gift packages meant for grateful peasants. The secondary explosion lifted the turret 3 feet in the air. It settled back at an angle. 20 meters down the road, another T-26 hit another log trap. The 25th Tank Regiment had crossed the border with 252 vehicles. 2 days later, half were burning wrecks. The Finns had no dedicated anti-tank battalion. Just logs, crowbars, grenade bundles, and gasoline bottles. The primitive had beaten the modern. Stone Age solutions had killed Space Age machines. The humming started at 0347 hours, low frequency, subsonic. It made teeth ache before the brain caught up. Soviet radio man Yevgeny Marchenko pressed his palm against his temple. The headache came in waves. "Comrade Lieutenant, the frequencies are clean, no interference." The metallic smell hung in the air like burning copper. It never left the whispering woods. Lieutenant Volkov spat into the snow. Red spittle. His gums had been bleeding for 2 days. Marchenko doubled over. Bile burned his throat. Around him, Soviet soldiers vomited into the snow. The 44th Rifle Division was falling apart. The forest pressed too close to the road. Dense boreal forest created acoustic anomalies. Wind through 30-centimeter snowdrifts. Branch resonance at low frequency. The men didn't know the science. They knew it. Felt like the trees were breathing. "The forest speaks," Sergeant Petrov whispered. "It calls names of the dead." From his concealed position 200 meters northeast, Private Vaino Koskala watched the Soviet radio operator through his Sako M/28-30 iron sights. The 7.6 2x54mm R cartridge sat ready in the chamber. He'd been motionless for 3 hours. His white snow cape made him part of the birch grove. The Soviets below fumbled with their equipment like city boys on a first hunt. They were afraid. Good. Fear made them group together, made them easy. The temperature gauge read -38 Celsius. In the Soviet bunkers, rifle bolts froze solid. Engine oil turned to black sludge. The BT-5 tanks, designed for European warfare, sat immobilized in conditions their engineers had never anticipated. Track grease solidified. Mosin Nagant rounds cracked from thermal stress before leaving the chamber. Colonel Sharov's radio crackled with desperation. "My men lack boots, snowsuits, and adequate food." His voice carried the weight of a man watching his command dissolve. Finnish positions lay 30 meters from those transmissions, invisible. Now came Simo Häyhä. The Seiko M/28-30 rifle weighed 4.6 kilograms. Iron sights offered no magnification. Pure marksmanship. No scope to fog, no lens to catch winter light and betray position. The man who carried it had grown up hunting elk in these same forests. He knew every sound the snow made, every trick the cold played on optics and steel. He kept snow packed between his teeth. Body heat melted it slowly. No breath, steam rising like a death flag above his position. He built compact snow barriers in front of the muzzle at every new firing point. The muzzle blast disappeared into white powder. He relocated immediately after each shot, random movement patterns. Survival demanded unpredictability. 5 kills per day. The arithmetic of death in the Karelian forest. Soviet counter-sniper teams deployed with PE scopes on their Mosin Nagants. The glass lenses caught morning light like mirrors. Häyhä eliminated 6 counter-snipers in 4 days. The Red Army issued new protocols. Travel in groups exceeding 20. Maintain constant movement. Never approach fallen comrades. The White Death used wounded soldiers as bait. Screams drew rescue attempts. Rescue attempts drew crosshairs. Radio intercepts revealed growing panic. Colonel Sharov transmitted in clear text, his encoded communications abandoned. "My men refuse forest patrols. Discipline deteriorating. Request immediate withdrawal from Sector 7. Moscow's response carried Stalin's signature coldness. "Cowardice will be punished. Advance or face tribunal." From the Soviet perspective, Finland had become a place where death struck without warning, without sound, without face. Senior Lieutenant Pavel Kozlov pressed into dirty snow and watched the forest. His squad had been 12 men at dawn. 6 remained. The others had simply stopped existing. No muzzle flashes, no shouts, just the wet thud of bodies hitting snow. "These Finnish ghosts," he whispered. His words formed ice crystals that betrayed his position. Häyhä chambered another round, smooth, silent. The brass casing disappeared into packed snow beside his rifle. 5 kills per day. Less than 100 days of active hunting. 542 confirmed eliminations. The bounty climbed to 3 million Finnish marks. Dead money for a ghost, nobody collected. The 163rd Division died in pieces. Mahdi warfare sliced the 40-kilometer column into isolated pockets. Each pocket faced annihilation alone. Finnish ski troops struck, vanished, struck again from a different direction. Soviet forces stretched thin as wire, then snapped at the joints. Political officer Mikhail Volkov stepped forward to rally his men somewhere around kilometer 32. His breath steamed white in the -40 air. The crack came from everywhere and nowhere. The 7.6 2x54mm R round took Volkov's center mass. He dropped into the blood-soaked snow. Nobody moved to help him. Sergeant Petrov watched Private Kozlov's bayonet find the next political officer's ribs before the man finished his first sentence. The blade punched through winter clothing and flesh. The Tokarev discharged into the snow as the commissar fell. NCOs turned on their own. Enlisted men shot their officers. The 163rd Division consumed itself in 30 minutes of savage violence. The political apparatus had been eating itself alive for days. Commissars shot by their own radio operators. Political officers hiding in supply trucks, refusing to approach the front. Men who had survived Finnish bullets choosing courts-martial over certain death in the Whispering Woods. Khrushchev would later admit the truth plainly. Poor fellows, they were ripped to shreds. I don't know how many came back alive. The 163rd Division ceased to exist as a fighting force on January 7th, 1940. Not destroyed by Finnish firepower, destroyed by its own collapse. Soviet recovery teams found the evidence in the days that followed. Entire squads frozen upright around dead campfires, rifles still in firing position, dead eyes staring at empty forest, no wounds, no signs of struggle. The cold had claimed what bullets missed. The temperature had simply stopped them where they sat, preserved like mannequins in some macabre theater at -43 degrees. 350 Finnish defenders had stopped an entire Soviet division at a 1,500-meter isthmus between two frozen lakes. The war continued grinding through the winter. Finland bled for every kilometer. The Red Army learned. Timoshenko replaced the failed commanders. Tactics evolved. Superior numbers eventually told. In March 1940, President Kyösti Kallio signed the Moscow Peace Treaty with prophetic words. Let the hand wither that signs this monstrous treaty. Finland lost territory. Karelia, significant lands. But Finland survived. Their independence intact. The tactical catalog the Winter War produced was unprecedented. Finnish forces with 4 vintage artillery pieces and 2 anti-tank guns had destroyed an armored division. Improvised weapons, logs, and crowbars and gasoline bottles had neutralized 229 of 252 Soviet tanks. Mahdi warfare had turned every road in Finland into a potential execution ground. White snow, capes, and iron sights, and packed snow in the mouth had made defenders functionally invisible against attackers who wore khaki in a white world. And in Berlin, Hitler was watching every detail. The Berghof conference room carried the usual weight of cigarette smoke and absolute certainty. Hitler's finger traced the map of Soviet positions across the Karelian Isthmus. The Winter War had ended 6 weeks prior. Fresh intelligence reports covered every surface. Look at this mess, he told Halder, jabbing at the Finnish positions. 3 million men against 300,000 Finns. 4 months to advance 65 kilometers. The numbers built his case for him. The 163rd Motorized Division had rolled in with brass bands and been annihilated. The 44th Rifle Division had been shredded by 350 men at a lake crossing. The 25th Tank Regiment had lost 229 of 252 vehicles to improvised weapons. Political officers fragged by their own troops. Entire companies refusing orders. Colonels transmitting in clear text, begging for boots and food. Simo Häyhä killed 542 Russians in under 100 days. One man with a bolt-action rifle and iron sights. Hitler leaned over the map. The structure is rotten. Kick in the door and the whole rotten edifice collapses. The intelligence assessments confirmed systematic failure at every level. Soviet logistics had broken down before the first Finnish bullet was fired. Men sent into -40 temperatures in summer leather boots. Khaki overcoats against white snow. Officers who had survived Stalin's purges by saying yes to everything, not by knowing anything. Hitler's fatal calculus took root in those smoke-filled rooms. If poorly equipped Finnish farmers could destroy Soviet divisions in -40 temperatures, the Wehrmacht's summer campaign would be over in weeks. 6 weeks, he told Jodl, maybe less. Operation Barbarossa's planning began with winter war assumptions. What Hitler had watched, but not understood, was which half of the equation actually mattered. He had seen Soviet failure. He had not seen Finnish genius. He had watched the Red Army collapse and recorded Soviet weakness. He had missed what the Finns had actually done, which was build an entirely new tactical framework from available materials, cold weather, terrain, patience, and the willingness to die for ground they knew better than their enemy. Stalin's generals saw something different. Marshal Timoshenko understood. Finnish ski troops had redefined mobile warfare in winter conditions. Their improvised anti-armor techniques had produced solutions that no doctrine manual contained because no doctrine manual had faced this problem before. The Red Army that had stumbled into Finland was not the Red Army that emerged from the Winter War. The survivors carried lessons written in frozen blood. Hitler had interpreted two things. He was correct about one. The Red Army of 1940 was the demoralized force he described. The Red Army of 1941 would be different, hardened by humiliation, reformed by Timoshenko, rebuilt around the tactical lessons that Finnish defenders had taught at the cost of territory and lives. The purged officers could not explain the deeper implications. The survivors stayed silent. The reforms happened anyway. Hitler's 6-week window against a rotten structure became 4 years of catastrophic attrition against a force already learning to fight like Finns. The door-kicking metaphor would haunt history. Marshal Mannerheim's phrase entered military language permanently. Kola holds. 2 words that meant 350 men had stopped a division. That terrain, plus preparation, plus the willingness to use winter as a weapon, could neutralize numerical and material superiority. Finnish tactics would reshape winter warfare doctrine for the next half-century. President Kallio's withered hand had signed the treaty that cost Finland territory. But Finnish resistance had demonstrated something that could not be unsaid. A small nation, outnumbered 10-1, could make conquests so costly that the cost itself became strategic. The Winter War bought time. Time for Finland to survive. Time for the world to watch. Time for Hitler to draw the wrong lesson from the right evidence. Back in the Whispering Woods, the brass band instruments of the 163rd Division lay frozen in snowdrifts. Even the propaganda couldn't survive -43 degrees. The gifted items meant for grateful Finnish workers sat buried under winter accumulation. The printing presses wrapped in canvas had never produced their victory proclamations. Simo Häyhä cleaned his Seiko M28-30 with religious precision. Snow counted in his ammunition. Iron sights aligned. 5 kills per day. Simple mathematics. brutal accuracy. I did what I was told, he said later, as well as I could. There would be no Finland unless everyone had done the same. The temperature dropped another degree. The White Death waited in the birch grove. The forest kept its secrets. And somewhere in Berlin, a man with a map was drawing arrows toward Moscow, certain that the door he'd watched Finns kick open would fall just as easily under German boots. He was wrong, but by the time the evidence proved it, the cost of that miscalculation was being paid in millions of lives, stretching from the frozen forests of Finland to the frozen streets of Stalingrad. The Winter War had ended. Its consequences were just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.